Hi, Real Recapped here. Today we're going to recap the thriller action movie from 2021 called Blood Red Sky. So without any further delay, let's get started. The movie begins at an airbase in Scotland, preparing for a hijacked transatlantic flight about to make an emergency landing on the port. Colonel Drummond is called into the airbase to deal with the situation, and as soon as he arrives at the airbase, a soldier informs him that they are operating under the belief that both the pilot and the co-pilot are dead. They further tell him that there is also the belief that at least one passenger on board the flight is on the German terrorist watch list. As Colonel Drummond walks into the command center, we see an officer explain to the plane how they should land at the airport while another officer observes their landing. The plane finally lands on the port rather roughly. Then Drummond contacts the plane to inquire about the situation on board, when suddenly they notice some movement near one of the plane's doors. Someone then throws a parachute out the door, and we see a boy climbing down for a parachute. The boy is approached by two RAF trucks under orders from Drummond to get the boy out of there. The command center then notices a new person on the cockpit, and Drummond radios the person saying that they will shoot him if he moves away. Drummond then instructs the person to get into the pilot seat and raise both hands. Then the man asks them to let him out of the plane so that he can explain everything that happened on board to them, while also insisting that he wasn't a terrorist. Drummond then sends a translator to talk with the boy we now know as Elias, who is currently being examined by a doctor. The translator didn't get any useful information from Elias because he is still in shock. The movie then transitions to a day earlier, where we see a woman in a hotel room called Nadia, who is also Elias's mother. She is in the bathroom getting ready for her flight. She later has a video call with her doctor in New York, where she is traveling to get treatment for her strange illness. Elias then calls Nadia to tell her that he has checked in their luggage. Later, she arrives at the airport at night and greets her son while they go into the waiting area to relax before their flight. She then leaves her son in the waiting area and goes into the bathroom. Once there, Nadia opens her medicine bag and readies a syringe from her medicine. She then drinks from a bottle and falls back slightly from the effects of the drink before injecting herself with the syringe she had prepared earlier. Later, we see a man named Farid on the phone in the waiting area before Elias starts talking to him. They enjoy the conversation, and then Farid asks Elias where his mother is. Nadia then arrives and they go into the plane and take their seats. In the cockpit, a stewardess asks both the pilot and co-pilot, who we know as Bastian, if they would want to drink some coffee. She then goes to the steward station and asks a man known as 8-Ball to take care of a sexist passenger in first class for her. The plane soon takes off from Germany, on course for the US. After some time, Nadia returns to her seat after a visit to the bathroom, then writes something in her notebook, then sees a picture of her and her husband inside the notebook. She then remembers a time they spent together, which ends up with them and their baby being stranded in the middle of nowhere. Her husband then leaves to get help, while Nadia stays in the car with the baby. Back to the flight, Nadia notices something happening at the front end of the plane was between 8-Ball and the sexist passenger, but eventually, an air marshal subdues the passenger while the second air marshal joins them up front. As both air marshals talk to the passenger, 8-Ball uses a knife to kill the second air marshal. While the passenger subdues the first one, 8-Ball then asks the man where the last air marshal was, and after getting the person's ID, he sends one of his men to kill her immediately. Curtis kills the female marshal, then takes her gun, and gives it to another man named Berg, then returns to 8-Ball. Soon as he returns, 8-Ball violently kills the air marshal to Carl's disgust. Back in the passenger section, Nadia can sense that something is not right when suddenly 8-Ball goes back to the passenger section and tells them to remain seated while threatening them with a gun. His men soon join him and force everyone to the back of the plane. Berg then goes to the cockpit and the Bastion opens the door for him, telling him that he killed the pilot already. They open a hatch and dump the pilot's body in it. Berg then announces to the passengers, telling them that they have taken over the plane, and orders everyone to put their hands on the seat in front of them. A bearded man known as Yuri finds the plane's black box and reprograms it, then informs Berg about it in the cockpit. The co-pilot then turns the plane off course. Elias soon gets scared for his mother, and she tells him she's alright. He checks the plane's schematics and shows her a place she could hide from sunlight. Curtis takes Farid and tells him to move to the front of the plane, while Carl tries to calm 8-Ball down, and soon after, Elias runs away from his seat. Nadia then tries to go after Elias, but 8-Ball stops her and shoots her in front of Elias. Carl grabs Elias and puts him back in his seat and tells him to stay there. Curtis then tells Berg what happened when they meet in the back. Berg then confronts 8-Ball and threatens to kill him if he does a thing like that again. We transition to Nadia's flashback with the stranded car. We see Nadia with her baby still waiting for her husband to get help. After a while, she leaves the car and follows her husband's footsteps when she sees an abandoned house. Thinking her husband was inside, she enters the house and sees blood on the floor. She follows a trail of blood to the basement when suddenly a vampire comes out and chases her. She then locks herself in the basement where she finds her husband's dead body. The vampire tries to enter the basement from the window while Nadia tries to prevent it from entering. The vampire then bites her before the morning sun kills it. Nadia soon wakes up in the plane alive after being shot. She hears dogs in a hatch below and drops down. Later, we see Berg as he forces Farid and 2 other men into reading a terrorist message while he records their voice. In the hold, Nadia tries to hide under a car as Yuri and Curtis enter looking for tools to make a bomb. Nadia soon finds a dog and eats it, but the dog had already made enough sound to call for Yuri's attention. As he approaches the location of the sound, he finds Nadia behind the car. She soon attacks and kills him. Meanwhile, Farid is allowed back into the passenger section when he finds seats next to Elias. Eventually, Nadia starts changing into her vampire form rather quickly. As she feels her teeth coming out, she grabs her medicine, but before she can take it, she hears Berg call to Yuri, telling him that they jumped 10 minutes from now. Nadia goes back into Yuri's body and drinks his blood, which speeds up her transformation. And soon after, she walks back into the other section of the plane. The hijackers lie to the passengers that a nerve gas will explode the plane if they move. They then find a dog next to Yuri's body, which Nadia did to make it look like the dog killed him. She then finds Elias and takes him to the cockpit, only to discover that the pilots were. Eventually, Nadia starts changing into her vampire form rather someone can fly a plane, and a man stands up and says he could, then follows Nadia into the cockpit while Farid tells the other passengers what the terrorists made him say. But before he could join Nadia in the cockpit, the doors were already locked. Later, the hijackers kit up into scuba gear, while Berg contacts the person that would pick them from the ocean. In the cockpit, Nadia continues to transform. She also sees the hijackers through the security camera. Soon after, 8-Ball realizes that Nadia isn't dead and returns to the passenger section with Berg to find her. A passenger tells them that she is in the cockpit, so they go there and tell her to open the door. Nadia tells the man to turn towards the US, even though they were closer to Europe, but he obeys because he is scared of her. The hijackers then notice the plane turning. Then Berg threatens to kill other passengers if she doesn't open the door. Berg kills a man, then gets a little girl, but before he could shoot her, Nadia jumps out of the cockpit and bites straight into his neck, which freaks out the other hijackers. The guy in the cockpit locks the door with himself and Elias inside. Nadia drinks Berg's blood and searches for the others while they run back to the hold. Soon, Berg starts changing into a vampire, and when Nadia hears him, she returns to his body and kills him immediately, while 8-Ball watches from a distance. She then walks into a bathroom to see how much she had transformed. Then 8-Ball takes her bag and reads from her notebook to the other hijackers. He tells them that she is a vampire, but Carl doesn't believe it. 8-Ball then gives them a UV light to use against Nadia. She gives herself an injection containing her meds and goes back into another flashback. We see Nadia as she goes through the stress of being a vampire while also taking care of a baby. One day, she goes back to the house where she got turned, then sees the father of the vampire that turned her. The man explains everything he and his son went through, then shoots her, saying they are all cursed. In the plane, 8-Ball makes a stake, while the others contemplate on what to do next. Carl tells them that they have to take the plane on course. Elias leaves the cockpit and takes his mother out of the bathroom. The hijackers return, and on seeing them, the man locks himself in the cockpit. Nadia gets up and walks towards 8-Ball, but he takes her down with the UV light. 8-Ball takes a syringe and fills it with her blood, but before he could stake her, Elias threatens him with a gun. 8-Ball walks towards Elias, but before he could take the gun, it shoots a window open, which destabilizes the plane. Nadia gives Elias an oxygen mask, then shoots 8-Ball, who runs away. Nadia takes Elias to Farid, while she goes after 8-Ball. She sees him in a bulletproof car, and after a while, he injects himself with her blood, despite all her pleas. 8-Ball starts transforming while Nadia figures out how to deal with him. She then finds some matches and alcohol and uses them to set 8-Ball and the car on fire. She has a brief memory, but soon returns to the front end of the plane, where the hijackers start shooting at her. Curtis then finds 8-Ball in the car alive, but 8-Ball attacks and drinks his blood before going after the others. The other passengers try to kill Nadia, but she subdues them. She then hears the other vampire behind the door. and runs towards it to prevent them from entering. Fareed rushes to help her, but he gets bitten by 8-Ball. Nadia cuts off Fareed's hand to prevent the venom from spreading, while Curtis tries to get into the section from the underneath. Nadia manages to put both 8-Ball and Curtis down the hatch and saves the stewardess. She takes the Bastion back to the cockpit, but he tells her they need to land the plane at the nearest airport because they are low on fuel. Fareed and Elias beg her to go underneath the plane because of the sunlight. An injured passenger soon releases 8-Ball and begs to be bitten, but 8-Ball ignores him and attacks the others. The plane is a wreck, and the other passengers try to get into the cockpit, but Bastion prevents them from opening the door. Fareed suggests they blow up the plane, but after setting up the explosive, they realize the detonator doesn't have a timer. So Nadia volunteers to blow it up manually when they are all out, and tells Elias that it must happen. Elias doesn't want his mother to die, so he goes back into the hold to get the right tools while fighting off the vampires with UV light. He gets the tools, but the vampires manage to subdue him. Nadia sees everything from the cockpit and tries to help Elias. She asks Bastion if the plane was on course, and he tells her that anyone can land it at this point. She then tells Fareed to take care of her son before feeding on Bastion to make her transformation final. 8-Ball hears Elias' scream, but before he could get to him, Nadia attacks him. Fareed then blows up the doors, and Nadia pushes 8-Ball out of the plane, but he crawls back and holds Elias. Fareed turns the plane sideways, killing 8-Ball after he's exposed to sunlight. Elias gives his mother his blood, which makes her want to feed on him more, but she controls herself and goes back into the hold. At the airbase, Elias begs the translator to get Fareed out, but she tells him that he is one of the bad guys. Elias continues begging, but they sedate him. Drummond gets back into the control section and insists that Fareed turn himself in, ignoring everything Fareed was saying while the other vampires feast on the passengers. They eventually shoot him down and take him out of the plane before he could blow it up. The soldiers enter the plane unaware of what was happening. As they transport Elias to the hospital, he manages to sedate the paramedics and jumps out of the ambulance and runs towards the plane. He sees his mother, but soon realizes that she wasn't his mother anymore. He blows up the plane to everyone's surprise. Fareed then walks up to the rubble and sees Elias lying down. They embrace each other, knowing that the worst has passed. And that wraps up our recap for the movie Blood Red Sky. Feel free to drop a comment below as to what we should recap next. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to turn on notifications. Thank you for watching, and see you next time on another Real Recapped.